I think we're live on the internet now. Currently, we are live on the internet. I believe that is correct. I don't have a way of knowing right now. We're definitely live on the internet right now, Nate Bauer. So just so everyone knows what's happening, our main broadcast platform, StreamYard, that handles live broadcasting for almost every single, all of the On3 shows that you might see across the network, it's just not working right now. So I have MacGyvered a system that hopefully you can hear me. So I've just pulled up our live stream here. They can hear us, guys. We are live on the internet right now, so thank you. I got this going as soon as I possibly could. Here's the thing. We have and we have 2 streams posted right now. Thank you very much, Chris. I'm broadcasting on we're sharing my screen right now. So I have very little control over the show. So the bells and whistles are just not going to happen today, but we are going to be talking to you about all the things that you need to know about Penn State football. Hope you guys are good. Nate, how you feeling out here on a high wire? I feel so exposed right now, Nate.
Yeah, I'm great. Hopefully I wasn't picking my nose or anything during the downtime, but here we are. Let's do it.
Yeah, Fitz, we've got recruiting to get to, and I believe we're going to have a bit of a truncated show. So let's go through some of the things that we're going to talk about today on the show. That's going to come up in just one second, but obviously the first thing here, Andy Kotelnicki staying at Penn State. He put out a tweet yesterday and announced that he is going to be returning to the Nittany Lions. So, Nate, I want to come to you on this particular conversation. How have you been following this story behind the scenes, and what do you know about how all of this went down that you want to share here on the show today?
Yeah, certainly the more details in our message board. I have been tracking it for the last couple of days and had a little bit of an update early yesterday afternoon, as well as last night, kind of given the circumstances surrounding it. But yeah, Andy Kotelnicki was interviewed on Sunday by West Virginia and decided not to pursue it. Right. I think it's, I'm not sure what the other reporting is out there on this, but I don't think it was a situation. Again, to my understanding, which I feel is pretty good. It wasn't he got offered the job and turned it down. It was he was being pursued, had some conversations, went through that process, and ultimately decided that it was better for him right now to remain at Penn State. So, that's as these things go, that's the kind of stuff that dictates future success, right? The carryover, right? All of that stuff is important to Penn State now, certainly for the playoff itself, but then also for the long term.
Yeah, so that's the conversation. This is both a short and long term story, Fitz. So which one do you want to tackle first when it comes to the college football playoff and keeping the band together, or do you want to talk about the long term and what long term even means in one of these situations?
First, I want to talk about the vulnerability of Nate without the Nate is right graphic. He was really leaning on that one because he was ahead of that one on Sunday afternoon, even threw it in my face when I posted about a half hour later. No, go ahead, T. Frank.
I was going to ask, we can do the show. It's just everyone's going to see under the skirt. They're going to be able to see all of me putting the buttons.
We don't want to see under your skirt.
Okay, all right. I didn't think so. I did not think so, but I just wanted everyone to know, like, there might be a possibility to do that. I'll work on that in the background. You guys keep going.
Yes. So first off, the distraction issue with the playoff coming up. It's probably less than you would think, especially when it's sort of cut and dry like this, when it stretches out. Okay, don't really talk to me before the Big Ten championship game. We'll handle all that next week. West Virginia came up here, interviewed him, and that was done within a matter of 36 hours, something around that time period. So it was a situation in which it was efficiently handled probably on both sides. The West Virginia coaching search in itself is interesting. Rich Rodriguez seems to be the choice of the money, and then the AD wants to do his own thing, which is, it's great, but it's going to end up backfiring at some point, I'm sure. So very curious to see how that plays out. But from the Penn State side of things, you can put this behind you. You can, do the graphics of the guy staying. You can do all these things that set you on course for the long term, of course, but also the next couple of weeks, because that's where you've got to be focused. And, football coaches, they're always about the next game, and the next job is huge, obviously, and it's a life-changing opportunity for a lot of people. But the next game, because these guys are psychopaths, is something that they're always thinking about. I'm sure he's sitting in the interview the other day thinking about, oh, this might work against SMU, because that's the way that these people are wired. And they're crazy. So I think that helps. It helps with the continuity. You don't want to go into the playoff with Ty Howell and Jaywan Sider calling plays. That's kind of how they went in last year for the bowl game and the last couple of weeks. And it's just not the same. I mean, you look at the differences in Penn State's offense preparing for Oregon than you've had against some of the last couple of opponents Penn State played, and it's clear how much goes into that and how much the other guy plays into it, and the feel goes into it, and all that kind of stuff. So for the short term, just cutting this off at the head and getting it over with on 2 weeks before the game, or approximately 2 weeks before the game, is huge. So I think that makes everybody breathe a little bit easier. Maybe it's not the last school that comes after him, but it makes you breathe easier, feeling that you're secure for the next couple of weeks, and then you handle the long term in the long term. And, that was an interesting thing there with the West Virginia side of it, is how quickly can their coach get there to do the transfer portal, to do all the roster building stuff that you need to do to set yourself up for next year. So that's very important as well. So I think it played out as well as it could have from Penn State's point of view.
So one thing here quickly. I am in here twice, so I'm hearing double audio myself. So if I come through double, let me know, and I'll close this out, and we'll just do the show the way it is. So once again, we're doing Tech Issues Live, which is just the most professional thing that I can possibly do. That being said, this is Fitz. You called this a 2-year expectation about having a coordinator anyway. So Nate, when we talk about this, and Fitz, you just kind of mentioned this, whether it's the last will come after him or not, we'll find out. But Nate, how does this affect? I'm sorry about that. How does this affect the long-term view of Drew Allar and Andy Kotelnicki playing together?
I don't think it hurts. Look, one of the things that is super interesting to me is I think we all go into this with this perception that things are just settled always, and they actually are the exact opposite of that. They are never settled. Right? So what did I say last week? Everybody's the star of their own movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so your decisions are your decisions, but they are impacted significantly by the decisions that somebody else makes. And so it's all hand in hand. I mean, I think that the takeaway from this for me is Andy Kotelnicki believes in Penn State, right? To take yourself out of the running of a power head coaching job is not insignificant. That's a thing, right? And so that's a big glimpse into the culture that Penn State has established, and I think further and more broadly, the potential that they believe that they have for, yes, this year for sure, going into this playoff. I mean, look at the playoff seeding and the potential path that they have to not just the quarterfinal, the semifinal. Like, I mean, you name it. There are opportunities for this team to make a real run, but also next year. And so, would it be appealing to Drew Allar to return and play for Andy Kotelnicki for a second year, given all of the wonderful things that Drew Allar has said about his relationship with Andy Kotelnicki? Yeah, for sure. So, but also, let's not ignore the fact that even if Drew Allar is buzzing toward a return at Penn State, if in 2 weeks NFL scouts come back to him and say, "Hey, bud, you're a top
Yeah.
7 pick
Yeah.
in this year's draft."
Oh, the football industrial complex already got a hold of the Big Ten championship game. The draft industrial complex is eating up that fourth down touchdown late in the game. So it's begun, Nate. He's been doing these things all year, and maybe not to the frequency that Penn State fans want, but now everyone's paying attention because you're doing it in solo games against Oregon.
It's so funny you mentioned that, because I got a text yesterday from a buddy of mine in the NFL who's connected and hears things, and effectively the message was, "Hey, everybody saw that.
Yeah.
Everybody saw that." And so to me, like, the message to me was, don't go all in on Drew coming back, even if that's their intention, just because the conversation before the start of that game, having him as a 3rd-round pick or whatever, right? Not part of the conversation. Like, there is no mock draft that has him in the top 10 on Saturday afternoon.
Right.
Will there be a mock draft in 2 weeks, 3 weeks that has him in the top 10? Maybe, but they're like, those guys are going to hear that. All the Dane Bruglers, all the dudes that do this are going to hear from their NFL scouts. "Oh yeah, by the way, Drew's an absolute dog, and sure, those interceptions weren't great, but you can live with them because did you see that play?
Yeah.
There aren't humans who can do that."
And he's getting better. Like, you can also have the narrative of, this is his 2nd year starting, blah, blah, blah. We've seen more flawed quarterbacks go much higher than Drew Allar. I mean, Jamarcus Russell went in number 1 overall, and that's, I mean, I could just stop the sentence there. There's 1,000 different things that Drew Allar does that's, excellent at the position. I had this conversation with somebody yesterday, and this is the problem, Fitz, is that when we have the conversation about the quarterback, and we're kind of straying a bit far afield from the Andy Kotelnicki thing, but it does come back to the conversation of growth and development and progress. Quarterbacks are out of the box great, or they're garbage. We do not have, it is a binary conversation. He'll never be the guy because he wasn't the guy immediately. And I just look at conversations, like, look at Trevor Lawrence. He was the out-of-the-box guy. Look at Andrew Luck, the out-of-the-box guy who was great in college and was in the NFL number 1 overall pick, generational prospect, blah, 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 blah. One guy, the situation was so bad he had to retire because of medical, and the other guy has been, I don't want to say ruined, but his progress has been stymied by Jacksonville. And also, he's hurt now too. So we look at these things as binary, and do you see Drew Allar as legitimately growing as a quarterback, Fitz? And do you think that progress can get to the point, I guess, do you see people looking at him and going, you know what, the progress next year in the NFL is going to be the point that he can be a starter? Or is it the conversation we've been having of, if he comes back for 1 more year, now we're talking about a guy who could be the number 1 overall pick maybe?
Yeah, the entire conversation is not about physical qualities. And I think that's kind of the always been the case with Drew, is how much he handles the again, I go back to anticipation. It's such a huge part of the pro game, and it's such a huge part of what he needs to continue to work on as a quarterback prospect. How much do you have it between the ears? I think he's a very sharp kid, but how much do you have that natural alpha mentality, which is something we've talked about quite a bit. So I think that's the scouting that's going on right now. And that's, there's, again, inexact science to a T. You've seen sure things miss. You've seen crazy things, the last pick in the draft playing the Super Bowl. Like this is very much an inexact science, and they have to understand that. But when you can control what you can control from a scouting perspective, that's the first place you're going to go, is between the ears. And there's even levels there, as we just talked about. There's smarts, and then there's the intuitive nature of making plays. The assertiveness that we saw on Saturday, certainly a positive step.
Yeah,
but he's a long way to grow as a quarterback from that aspect, and as a leader from that aspect.
So Big Spirit here in the chat, and I apologize, I don't have the controls I normally do, so I can't put your comments up here on the show specifically, but he says, or they say, and it asked the question that I asked without an opinion in the front of it, Fitz. And also more succinctly. So, Nate, do you think Drew is mature enough yet to enter the league, even if he is projected high leaving early? Could that ruin his career trajectory? Like, that's the balance of the conversation. Is it here? Is it not? Like, what maturing can you do in the NFL and not ruin yourself if you go to a bad situation? And what maturing can you do in college to ensure you are that overall pick?
If you listen to James Franklin on Sunday during his Zoom with reporters, there was kind of one statement that set off alarm bells for me, which was in a positive way if you're Penn State, of, hey, it's scary how much he has developed already from last year to now. And it's scary what that means for his future, because there's still so much more room for him to grow. And so, yeah, my interpretation of that is that Jay Franklin feels pretty good about him coming back to Penn State, but also that
with
is
its
a thing that
120 psi
has this
power.
weird, I have never connected with it. This notion that Penn State under James Franklin cannot develop quarterbacks. Yeah, they can. Right? Sean Clifford was not a 5th round quarterback when he got to Penn State. Like that, the idea. Trace McSorley was not a NFL quarterback before he got to Penn State. They have had very few under James Franklin starting quarterbacks to begin with, and the ones that they have had have gotten better as their careers have gone on. So, yeah, with Danny O'Brien, they feel really good about that tutelage there. Andy Kotelnicki running the show, there is ample room for him to go. But like, I do think that part of the NFL conversation that's super interesting to me is this idea that there is a line that is real that you step over, and when that happens, it's like Field of Dreams that you become a doctor.
Yes.
Right? That's not it. Is Drew is getting better. He is continuing to get better.
Yeah.
Why do we have it in our heads? Yes, it is super dictated by the place that you end up. If you go to the New York Giants, you're going to be dealing with a trash organization. They don't do a good job of anything, right? Versus the Eagles, versus whatever. I mean, there's a number of NFL franchises that have shown that they can do this and bring a quarterback along. But if the onus is on Drew Allar to step in on day one and be the starting quarterback and lead an NFL team to 13 wins, like, yeah, that's probably unrealistic. But you just don't know. Like, you just don't know when that's going to happen.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. I do want to move on to a couple different things, including some things that we have to get to today on the show, including our sponsors. Penn State is in the college football playoff. Now's the time to start thinking about your travel arrangements should the Lions advance to the quarterfinals or beyond. We've all talked about, we said this, Nate wrote about this on Sunday. They won the jersey scouting of the college football playoff because of their path through the bowl season and the playoff bracket. So if you're thinking about going to the Fiesta Bowl, if they were to advance, or beyond maybe, you can be part of the action with all-inclusive bowl game travel through Collegiate Athletic Travel, a national leader in sports travel. For over 50 years, they're in partnership with Center for Travel, your state college-based go-to companies for Penn State Bowl trips. They have air-inclusive packages featuring round-trip air transportation from select Pennsylvania cities, deluxe hotel accommodations, airport and game transfers, pregame events, as well as game tickets. And because we're around the New Year's, it's also a partridge in a pear tree. They do everything for you, all under the eye of the Collegiate Athletic Travel seasoned event staff who know the locations. They know the hotels. They have relationships, and they've had them for a very long time. So they're able to get you the best possible experience so you can go and have a great time. And that's your responsibility, not to book your Uber and make sure you have your tickets and all that stuff. They take care of all of the obnoxious things about travel. You should be investing in experiences that are worth having, not just having an experience. So for those of you traveling to the bowl game, maybe you're not doing the airfare, you can also do your land-only package where you get all of that stuff. You just get yourself to the game. So athletictravel.com. Check out details in coming days once things are finalized, or call 814-238-4987. I'd encourage you to call right now, 814-238-4987, because when these book up, they book up fast, and you want to be on the plane. Fitz, Nate? No, Nate, you were at Anti-Fragile like at 10 o'clock at night the other day. I just love the fact that we were in the chat, we were having a good time, we were talking, and suddenly you send me a picture of you at Anti-Fragile. I love this because it was a weekend where you missed your normal window of being there on a Friday, I think.
I did. I was not able to go on Friday afternoon, which is,
Thank you very much, Andrew Olish and Jerquaden Guilford, but that's beside the point. Glad we had those prepared. Anyway,
very inconsiderate of those two young men. But no, you know what? I made up for it anyway. I was able to get there on Friday night, and because we went to the Big Ten Championship on Saturday, as we are veteran savvy travelers. It's so great. They clapped for me when I came into. It was a joke. It was a joke. It was a joke. They were really actually teasing me, and I can appreciate that. I really enjoy the ribbing. But in any case, great beer. Obviously, just the place for if you are an adult not looking for a $5 pitcher of liquor that is all mixed together
and mostly sugar,
will make you vomit, and mostly sugar and terrible. This is it's the spot. The beer is all brewed in house. They got cheesesteaks outside. It is the spot, and we are hopefully, fingers crossed, gonna maybe organize a thing where the three of us go there and tell you guys about it, and then you guys can all come and we'll just drink beer together.
I'm super excited for that idea. And then you're like, maybe we could do a show, and I'm like, I don't want to be on air with a beer. I can trust Fitz doing that. Ooh, we cannot trust T Frank doing that. So appreciate Anti-Fragile, major sponsor here on the BWI Live Show. You're going to have another opportunity to come into town and go check out Anti-Fragile. Get there early, get there often, and come back. It's going to be, maybe it's a busy weekend, but you want to make a trip to State College anyway, because why wouldn't you want to come up here and hang out? You can go to Anti-Fragile anytime, not just on football weekends. So, Fitz, I think we might have to, because we're way behind from our technical issues, we might have to skip the recruiting update today, because I do want to get to the important thing, which is to talk about Oregon and the game. We haven't really had a chance to walk through what we saw and our conversations around the game. We've been having them at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for a couple of days now. But I want to start with this. A defense that gives up as many points as they did, but gets the ball back to the offense with 2 minutes left and the opportunity to tie the game. How do you square that performance from that side of the ball?
Boy, that's tough. It's like a whole rationalization in your head here, because they were not good. And hey, you say the same thing about Oregon, gave up 38 points. Those are two good defenses on all the metrics that we saw leading up to that game. And then all of a sudden the offense is like, hey, we're going to take the cake from here. And Oregon, you're used to that. Penn State, you're not, especially in a big game. And that's why I'm encouraged coming out of the game, because of the offense. But yes, this defense, I would say it's a bit worrisome in the sense that you've got SMU coming in that can spread it around, that's got some athletes that can really run. Oregon obviously has really, really good, better athletes that can run.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I've seen, we talked about this the other day, Tez Johnson. I haven't seen somebody accelerate like him since KJ Hamler. It's just a different kind of speed. And I'm not sure that SMU has that. That's not knocking SMU's speed, but
who does?
But saying you're not as fast as Tez Johnson on the field is a backhanded criticism that not many people are. So I will give Penn State the benefit of the doubt there. They're also going to be home. They're going to be on turf. They're going to be in familiar confines. And I think that's probably an underrated aspect of this whole first round is you feel Beaver Stadium around you. You feel the sight lines and the angles. And, it's like when you play basketball and you go into a gym you've never been into before, it takes a second to settle in. Whereas Penn State's been there before. So I feel confident in that. Yeah, Tom Allen was pretty well schooled in that first half. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a situation where Oregon was finding those spaces. The field felt like it was 80 yards wide, and Oregon was finding those seams. And whether or not they scaled back things and kept things closer to the line of scrimmage in the second half, whether that's by design or in anticipating maybe some changes that Penn State would make, yeah, it was still not great for old Tommy. So you look at what's out there, and it's I hate to call it a one-off because you can't guarantee that. And it comes down to the mix of execution of the game plan and execution of the actual plays. Like Kobe King making a tackle on 1st and 10 is very different than Kobe King going right over top of him, and then all of a sudden it's a new set of downs at close to your 50-yard line. So I think that there's a lot that goes into that. From a fundamental aspect, we talked about Tony Rojas, how the shoulder has. I had this conversation on the board this morning, how the shoulder has impacted everything else. It's a trickle down effect that really, really takes you out of your game, because it's not just like you're going to focus on the tackling, obviously, but you're also going to have to look at if his shoulder is bothering him in a sense that he's probably going to have to get worked on after the season.
He had a tackle where he had James by the ankle and his left arm did nothing. Like, it just didn't react to the play. Like, I know, I guess this is the thing, Fitz, is the conversation around Tony Rojas is that he stinks and that he's not any good and that all those things. Like, that is the narrative, but this is my major frustration with the James Franklin we're not talking about injuries thing, because Oregon can see it on film. I was able to pick it up on film, and I'm not a coach. So, like, I don't know. The only thing he's doing is not giving a benefit of the doubt to Tony Rojas in these situations. But can he continue to play if this is going to be the way he plays? That's the bottom line. It is a production-based business, and it seems like the defense is a little more stable, a little less athletic, a little more stable when Dom DeLuca is out there. And I think that, like, is that a conversation that we need to have, or is it just a non-negotiable at this point in the season? It is what it is, and it's going to be that.
Yeah, I think it's matchup dependent, and like I said, SMU will spread you out, and you need more speed on the field, and that's kind of what you get. So I don't think it's going to change. You're going to get a couple of weeks for him to take off, and I think he did that after the second bye week. He kind of looked okay. Like he took a little bit of time, got a little bit healthier, and things helped. That's kind of the thing here. You're talking about, well, at least one game, like one playoff game. Mm-hmm. You win that. I mean, the expectation on the back end is that you're playing another season after this, and you're not. It's just like you're tightening the rotations. We talked about this with defensive tackle. You're tightening the rotations, and you're going to get essentially what you saw in the Big Ten title game, and the execution was not there, and that's not really what you want. But at the same time, nobody's swinging on a rope here to save you from everything. Keon Wiley's not going to be the guy that comes in and changes the dynamic of the room. Tyseer Denmark on offense, this is not going to happen. So you got to roll with the guys that you have. And if they can get him healthy enough, it can be okay. I don't think it's going to be great. I still think he's going to be good next year. But it's got to get fixed first. And that's the issue. It's not going to happen in December. So going back to what I said earlier, it's a breakdown of fundamentals in the sense of, okay, I know that I can't take this block on like I would, because if I do so, my shoulder is going to fall off or whatever it's going to be. Then you change your angle. You over rely on the athleticism. His athleticism is great, but it will take him out of plays as well. If you can't get square, you're kind of screwed there. So you've got all these little things that just kind of add up, and then the end product is a result of all those little things. It's like, yes, that's overly simplified, but there's so many things overly simplified with this game that people don't really want to hear. It's like the keeping it on schedule and all this kind of stuff, where those things really matter. And I think that that's what you see with Tony Rojas. And yes, I mean, how SMU will attack him is going to matter. How he will be able to attack the blockers and how he will be able to deal with the traffic in front of him is going to affect him. And Dom you can't deny Dom made plays. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think Penn State's going to roll with what it's got, and that goes for the entire roster.
Nate, I don't want to belabor because we got to get to the offense. We only have a couple minutes left because of the shorter show. But I said this, and I realized it in the middle of the postgame show of the defense allowed 14 points after halftime. I know they allowed 31 in the first half. 7 of those came from the 1-yard line, given a turnover. So how do you feel about the way they were able to adjust? Because the opening game script didn't work, but we hear in the chat, we hear on the postgame show, we hear on the internet, we hear on Twitter, we hear on everywhere. You hear it on the moon. Tom Allen's a bad defensive coordinator. But he did adjust and then limited that offense to 14 points in the second half, allowing the offense to crawl back into the game. So what's your assessment of the performance on that side of the ball?
To be honest with you, I think look, like the reasoning on the 2-point conversion was sound in the sense that Penn State and James Franklin did not want to go to overtime. And the reason that he spelled out because of that is that Oregon was scoring. They were having a tough time stopping Oregon from scoring. That's not 100% true, right? Like, they got stops in the second half. They were taking strides in getting them more under control. So I do think that there was more control, more restraint of Oregon in the second half. Also, a pick six or virtually a pick six doesn't help you there on the scoreboard. They like kind of the conversation of, oh, Penn State gave up 45 points as this really good defense. In the analytics, Penn State and Oregon's defense were virtually the same defense this season. They more or less mirrored each other in the same ballpark, I would say. Well, they actually both gave up the same amount of points, right? Like they both gave up 38 points. So it was a similar when you have playmakers, and again, this kind of struck me like 10 minutes ago of something that Fitz was saying, and you guys talking about Tez Johnson. I think that we ignore the fact that Oregon right now or during that game was saying to itself, holy crap, Nick Singleton's a dude.
Yeah.
Like, oh my goodness, can you believe the catch, right? Like the throw that Drew Allar just made. I'm just saying, like, there's such a one-sidedness of things that we're unfamiliar with, which is we didn't watch Oregon all season. So you see Tez Johnson, you're like, dude, that guy makes plays. Like Dylan Gabriel, dude, that guy makes plays. But also, Penn State matched in many ways the firepower there.
Yeah.
And so I do think that there's a little bit of a jumping off point for them going into this going into the playoffs.
So that is the next part of this, and it's a perfect transition. And I'm just asking the hard questions that I've been wrestling with, and I just want to like have a therapy session for fans here. They don't win that game without Drew Allar. They also don't win that game because Drew Allar threw that interception at the end of the game, and then the one in a one-score game, and you win and lose by 8. That turnover at the 1-yard line is a major problem. Now, the defense set the stage for them to have to press a little bit, and you got Drew Allar the most aggressive we've ever seen. So, Fitz, how do you feel about Allar's performance? And like what we started with, the draft industrial complex is going to gobble up some of his decision-making, and then in a day and a half, somebody's going to quote tweet and be like, yeah, but what about this one? And they're going to show the backside dig that he threw behind Khalil Dinkins that was returned to the 1-yard line. I have not been able to square how I feel about Drew Allar's performance because he did things that I've been waiting to see him do since I saw him as a junior, right? Since we saw all of this evolution in high school, junior in high school, that is. So how are you feeling here today after watching what he did?
Yeah, I feel okay. I mean, here's the thing. We look at Drew as this, what do you call him? Pro style is what we used to call him when we were not differentiating between a quarterback being quarterback, because you have to be some sort of athletic right now. And the plays that he made on Saturday, I called him assertive. Like the decisions that he made with the football in his hand, whether that be throwing it, whether that be taking it down, running it, doing some other, fun things with the football, was really good. It didn't always result in a completion, and you saw that in his completion percentage. But I mean, I think we said it a couple times this year. Like, it was the USC game where he threw a couple picks, right? Like, you take those picks if you get the looseness of the rest of his game. And I think we got that on Saturday night. So I'm fine with it. You obviously never won interceptions, but at the same time, the risk averse nature of his game that we've seen over the last 2 years really wasn't there on Saturday night. So I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Now, yes, that throw, the throw at the end of the game, which I don't question the decision because that is a shot situation, but you can't miss inside, and he missed inside. So those are the margins that you're talking about being a different quarterback, and of course, getting dinged in your completion percentage for throwing a completion to Amari Evans. That those little things sort of add up. So I mean, it's
yeah. The chat is hot about the refs once again, which I don't
Yeah.
blame them for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, this is not a ref show, but like, no doubt. Like when you that ball's 8 inches off the turf, it's like that's really bad.
Both of his hands are underneath it. He secured it. It was a perfect catch, and then they're like, "Nah, no, that wasn't." Yeah. They must have been scouting Amari Evans and watch him drop that ball early in the year. And they're like, "Surely there's no way that he came through this time."
Whoa,
we didn't need that.
Sorry.
No, but
that's aggressive.
I mean, that's what the auto replay is there for, right? Like that's the one that you just got to be like, you buzz down and you say, okay, because James post game comments on that were flatly wrong. Like he's talking about running a 2-minute offense, and hey, if it's an incomplete pass, the clock is stopped. So like, take your time and figure that stuff out. So like, I mean, that's kind of where I stand with that kind of stuff. But getting away from the officiating, back to Drew, like you'll take that. Like I'll take entertaining football.
Oh, yes.
He was an entertaining player on Saturday night, and that hasn't always been the case. Sort of waiting for the, waiting. It's like playing the video game and waiting for the button. The difference between your finger hitting the button and then it happening on screen, waiting for it to happen, really wasn't what you saw from Drew on Saturday night. So I'm encouraged by that. I'm encouraged by looking at the specter of the playoff and looking at how things have gone in the last 10 years of the playoff. You're going to need points. You're going to need a lot of points. And I said it on the show, the live show after the game, the fewest amount of points scored by a winner in the playoff is 24. And that's not a huge number, but I think it was 24, 2 27s, and then everything else over 30 points. So defense wins championships, but you're going to have to score a lot of points.
The defense wins championships as they get you the ball back. I think, Nate, a couple years ago, your point was, before everyone was kind of, I don't want to say spoiled by Manny Diaz, but maybe a little bit, was you need to get a stop more than the other team per game is how you described modern college football. By the way, I feel really bad about the Amari Evans joke. So, sorry.
Mean.
Sorry,
I love Amari.
No, that was unfair. So I try to always be fair, and that was not necessarily the fairest thing to say. Okay, so the question I have for you then is, do you think this aggressiveness continues? Because it almost sounded like when James Franklin talked about this that it was game plan specific. I got the vibes of that. Do you feel that way, or do you think that, as people in chat have said, this new Drew that we've unlocked is, I'm good with that. I'm hesitant to say that this is something that continues, because I thought that after USC, and then we didn't get that for the rest of the season to the same extent. So I don't want to overreact to this, given that it felt like they took the restrictor plate off the offense. What do you think?
Look, I think that there is nuance and rationale to all of this that ultimately boils down to the type of game that Penn State goes into the game expecting. Like, do you expect the other team to give you problems defensively that you are going to have to keep up with? Yes. All right. Then they're gonna be more aggressive. They're gonna make more plays in the vein that they tried on Saturday night. However, look, let's also be real about why Penn State was successful on Saturday night. The running game broke tackles repeatedly.
Oh yeah,
and moved the sticks repeatedly. And right as all of that got going, Kotelnicki got going himself to have Oregon on a string.
Oh, let's talk about Drew in the run game. He's never kept on those power options. He's not once this season, I don't believe, he's kept on those power options. That's the full Andy Kotelnicki offense. You got to finally see it, and it is fun and explosive when it all works.
Yeah, so depending on the type of game they have that they get into, that is to me what you're going to see, and some of that is reflected, I think, in and through Drew. Is, hey Drew, this is the type of game, right? The type of game that you need from him is you're gonna have to be aggressive. You are going to have to anticipate. You're going to have to make the throws that you otherwise might shy away from because there is a safer option out there for you. Uh, it's going to be interesting to me based on SMU's reputation. Is that what you are expecting, or has SMU not played a defense of Penn State's caliber this season? Right. That's
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that right now.
Yeah, and I don't want to be a hot take artist again accidentally, but people keep asking that, and like I pointed out I pointed to what I saw in film yesterday, watching SMU's defense, which is they made Clemson one-dimensional, and then the return was Clemson has no running backs and their offensive line is garbage, and I'm like, okay, sure, like yeah, that's probably true. It's the first scouting report on this defense, so the ACC has a different perspective than the Big Ten and the SEC, which has been the whole narrative of the college football playoff. Fitz, offensive line. I feel like we need to give them some love here on our kind of closing remarks. I know that we glossed over it. Nate Bauer talking about Nick Singleton. We need to just highlight that for a second, but the offensive line gave them room to run in this game that I don't think they were expecting based on the game script coming out.
Yeah, the two guys that we highlighted, Nolan Rucci and Nick Dawkins, more than held up. And I think that's, I mean, when you take a look at Nick Dawkins' matchup against Derek Harmon, that was not one that you would forecast to even be a standoff. Like this was one that you kind of expected to get dominated, and they didn't get dominated at all. So very, very encouraged by that. Again, I will say this. There's no transitive property. That's not necessarily going to carry over to SMU. It might, absolutely. But like the confidence that you can take out of that is the biggest thing that you can take. Like you're going to feel good about the way that you did that to Oregon's defense, which again, even though they gave up 38, and it was very funny because you saw people were like, well, maybe these defenses aren't that good. I still think they're really good.
Yeah.
But it's a matter of matchups. It's a matter of Penn State against an odd front, which Oregon was in multiple looks at certain times, but Penn State against an odd front did really well. Like that's what you want to see, especially when you're playing a team from a different conference like SMU that's used to a different style. Like that is, Oregon plays more of that style than Penn State does, just with the front four and things like that. So I'm encouraged by that, and I'm encouraged especially by Rucci. We've said things about him on this podcast that he was, not up to the standard, and he's not Anthony Donka. He's still not Anthony Donka, but he more than held his own. And again, confidence is going to work so well with those guys in the next couple of weeks because you've got that tape, and all of a sudden you're feeling like you can push people around. You're going to find out that SMU is not as big as Oregon, and you're going to feel like, oh, well, if we push Oregon around, maybe we can do that to SMU. And I'm not saying that they're going to be overconfident, but like, you really needed that.
Belief and confidence are huge for a football player, and I don't think we credit enough.
For it to come against not Maryland, for it to come against not a team, that. I mean, Washington is Washington, but like you feel okay about how you handled that one too. For it to come against an upper echelon team, the number one team in the country. I mean,
it felt like it helped. It felt like it helped that they weren't Ohio State. Just the jersey color, it almost felt like to a certain degree because, Ohio State, maybe it's a familiarity factor, but the defensive line for Ohio State is good. They don't present the same schematic challenges as that Oregon defensive line did, as you pointed out. I do like the fact that they went tempo and didn't let them get into a lot of those pre-snap shifts where they're shifting odd and even and ruining everything. That was a really good, but they didn't do it the whole time, and they still were able to run.
And that was both sides. Like you see the ability to, if you can go fast, and Oregon just dragged Penn State in the first quarter going fast. You don't get your calls in, you don't get your dummy calls in, and then all of a sudden you're kind of leaving yourself out there, and you got guys that are not in 3-point stances on the defensive line when the ball snapped. Like that those are the things that matter there, and Penn State was able to do that a little bit as well. So the varying tempos is not it's number one, it's not easy to do. Like on offense, it's not easy to get that communication in there, to go through there to figure out which your next sequence of plays are going to be. It's not easy. And then on top of that, if you can do it, if you can master it, hey, they're college kids. Make them think,
Yeah.
make them react
Yeah.
while thinking. And that to me is the entire story of both of these defenses. Yes, I think they're very talented defenses, but when you make college kids think, and this is not a slight on anybody, when you make college kids make decisions on the fly, sometimes they're going to be the wrong decisions. And we
Yeah.
saw that on both defenses the other night.
Nate Bauer, I feel like I need to get a haiku from you about Nick Singleton. But we are running short on time. But just give me your best running back conversation here quickly before we get to the final thing, because I do want to set up what's next for Penn State this week and the et cetera to end the show.
Yeah, I don't have the stats in front of me, but this is the non-injured back version of Nick Singleton. And honestly, Katron had a great game too.
Yes.
Right? Like Katron made plays. When you can have those two working in tandem like that together, again, with the offensive line being as operating at that level, like that's the vision, right? And I'm not sure that it's fair to say that it took 13 games to get there, but certainly against that quality of an opponent, yeah, that is that to me that was the best, most explosive performance that Penn State has had this season.
I'll round it out for you
and-
with the stats. 8 combined
Yeah.
broken tackles, over 153 yards after contact, and Nick Singleton averaged 6.4 yards after contact. That's Katron Allen. Nick Singleton averaged 5.7 yards after contact. So they got into the second level, and for the first time in a long time, they made the defense pay for that fact by ripping off runs and breaking tackles. It was very fun and exciting to watch. Okay, Fitz, last thing here. Transfer portal opens today. In the chat, somebody asked, what does the offense even look like around Drew Allar if he were to come back for next year? How much of that is happening right now for Penn State, and how much has to happen whenever they're done with the season, which could be as late as January 20th? None of this makes sense in my brain. Does it make sense to you, and how does it make sense?
Yeah, portal opened yesterday. It's a process in the sense that Penn State's a little behind naturally. Like Penn State played an extra game, had an extra week. They were supposed to have conversations the week leading up to the Big Ten title game, but when you're preparing for a Big Ten title game, you push those things back. So those conversations are happening right now. James Franklin is in Vegas, or was in Vegas. I don't know if he's still there, with Abdul Carter for some awards, or the award shows. So those are going to continue to happen. Very big decisions on the horizon beyond Drew, Nick Singleton. You look actually all over the board. There's a lot of big decisions that are lingering out there. So figure out most of that right now. You're not going to get final words on everybody, but figure out most of it, and you've got a pretty good idea of what you're looking for in the portal. Defensive line, without having those conversations, you still know that you're going to need defensive linemen, because Amin Vanover's done. Carter obviously is going to go to the draft. You've got Smith, Vilbert, and those 3 defensive tackles that are all, all those guys that can't possibly come back. There's
Right.
COVID math, and then there's guys that just can't possibly come back, and that leaves a big hole in your defensive line there. Obviously, Penn State fans going to look at receiver pretty heavily and look at every receiver in the portal, or that goes in the portal, and think that they're all better than Penn State's guys, and they're not. Again, Fool's Gold season is here, and it is spectacular. So we're going to continue to cover that on BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. I just posted a little bit ago a defensive lineman I know Penn State's pretty interested in on our portal thread. So check that out. But yeah, it's going to be fun, and it's not going to come as fast and furious as Penn State fans would like it to. Is basically, I'm setting the expectation there that everybody that goes in is not a great player. Like, there's a reason that a lot of those guys are in the portal, but you got to do your evaluations. You got to find those gems, and you got to go with those guys. You look at the guys that Penn State's been interested in, and there's no clear format. Derek Tangelo is different than Chop Robinson. You've got all these different guys that can be really good players. You even look at Penn State's two starting corners. You've got a former 5-star who played 1 year, and you've got a guy that was highly regarded that bounced around and was supposedly not any good for Florida last year, and all of a sudden he comes back, and he's had a pretty solid year in Jalen Kimber. So there's no sense of this is the guy that you need to profile and find. And it could come from lower levels, it can come from higher levels, but like,
do you want it to?
I mean,
yeah.
I've seen articles where here's all the guys that could fit. And half to most of those guys are not going to be options for Penn State because someone put a great post on our message board a couple of weeks ago regarding how you transcribe or how you decode the tweets about guys going in the portal. If it mentions their former star ranking, that means they probably haven't done anything there. If it mentions the stats they had over a career, that means they're probably a compiler. If they mention stuff that they just did last year or their first team all whatever, those are the ones you kind of raise the antenna for. So very, very fun thing, very frustrating thing to cover and follow because everybody wants every name. And that's just not how this thing works. And that's not how Penn State operates. Penn State's been very good at finding actual players in the portal. And it's not 100% success rate. Nobody has a 100% success rate. But if you can find a couple of those guys to plug, like, hey, Derek Tangelo, I will keep beating the drum for that. Hell of a player for Penn State and was barely a whisper on the radar because everybody was looking at other prospects.
And he had to play out of position because of what happened along the defensive line. So we didn't even get the full plan of what it was to have him there and how he was, I think they envisioned him to play. That is just I agree with you wholeheartedly. Nate, we got to get out of here. So final thoughts here on the show for us today.
Penn State basketball plays tonight. Am I allowed to talk about that?
Sure. I mean, with what happened on the show today, I'm so ecstatic that we got what we got. So go for it. Not that basketball's never welcome or anything, but like there are no rules today, Nate. There are no rules.
Yeah, no rules. Penn State plays basketball tonight at Rutgers, and if they win, Penn State should be like 15-1 before they're challenged again. So the notion of a top 25 Penn State basketball team is very much within the grasp of Penn State basketball. So, for the fans who maybe want to spice up their December and January, in addition to the capacity that they have for a college football playoff run, hey, check out Penn State basketball. It's an intriguing team and an intriguing program right now.
Nate, when did you get 90 votes in the AP poll?
That's a hilarious take. I honestly, somebody asked if they would be ranked this week, and I actually thought there was no question that they would be ranked. My guess, and not by any fault of the voters, is that many of them saw a final score of 81-70 in their upset of number 8 Purdue, not realizing that the majority of that game was spent with a 20+ point lead. Right, Penn State just beat the crap out of Purdue. That this is like, I'm gonna pull the curtain back. They're gonna go to the NCAA tournament. This is a good basketball team. Like they're good.
Fitz, I love how we had the same reaction.
I know.
You don't really. I mean, hey, you set the expectation where you set the expectation, and hey, they're.
He called it the last time.
Yeah. Nate was right. We'll save that one for after the
year. I know, but it holds no water now because it's December 10th. Like I've been able to see them, and so it's like that one was an actual prognostication. That one was in like October. This is different. I have the benefit of seeing them absolutely frustrate the living daylights out of opponents, and that carries, like that travels.
Right.
So.
All right. Well, as always, check out Nate Bauer's work on Penn State football and basketball, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Recruiting from Sean Fitz at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Subscribe right now, and you can try us out for a week for $1, and then you can decide if you want to go all in. But just go all in because we've got a full year of this stuff, the drama, the intrigue, the football, the basketball, the wrestling. I'm going to be over talking to Cale Sanderson later today and getting that audio, hopefully, for you here on the YouTube channel. But before we go, I do want to say once again, thank you to Sean Fitz and Nate Bauer for working with me today. We had massive technical issues that were outside of our control. We still were able to get you a show, which I'm very proud of, and I want to say thank you to everyone here in the chat for sticking around and coming back with us, for having anybody here on the show today after all that happened at the start. Oh, I love you guys. Thank you so much for being here. We'll be back tomorrow. Let's hope there are no more problems, because I might lose